Welcome, all the Resilient Diabetics out there. In today's episode, we're going to ask and solve one very important question. Can diabetics drink coffee? Is coffee safe? And the big question for us, does coffee raise blood sugars? Can drinking coffee also keep you lean and fit and look like this? It's no joke. Not only will we tackle these important questions, but I will teach you how to set up your own very simple test model so you know how coffee will directly affect you. Now, how you respond to coffee, in particular caffeine, will be unique to you and to you alone. We as diabetics, we have limits on everything we face, with decisions that literally impact our health. We're told sometimes at point blank, no, you can't eat that. No, you can't drink that. It's like as though we're robots. There are certain aspects of life that do bring us joy. Honestly, how delicious is that first cup of coffee in the morning? That first really hot cup kind of nestled in your hands kind of changes my outlook for the day. You may not know this, but every single time I'm recording one of these videos, I've got my warm cup of coffee with me. My thoughts upon waking up, usually around 4 in the morning, are not always the most positive. I actually have to get up and begin that hectic routine that just waits for me. It's that cup of coffee that lures me out of this state, that kind of gives me the willpower to tackle the morning head on with no excuses. That cup of coffee really brings us a little piece of joy and comfort. But there are some limitations. We are diabetic. Those that are trying to control blood sugars, there are solid lines that must be drawn at times. If you're newly diagnosed diabetic and you're struggling to control your blood sugar levels, limiting the amount of caffeine in your diet may actually provide some benefit. Your doctors will be right. First, you must have your knowns in place from the medications you need, balanced against the foods that you tolerate. Then and only then would coffee provide you any benefit. What we as diabetics drink and eat directly affects our blood sugars. We often concentrate in on the food, and food is talked about quite a bit, but what we drink is just as important. So before we begin, let me welcome again all those resilient diabetics out there. This is where we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into extraordinarily well-controlled diabetics. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Jay Sampat. I am also an insulin-dependent diabetic, diagnosed a little over 5 years ago. So not only am I a diabetic like you, so we're going to be walking the walk and talking the talk together. But I also do have a University of Bachelor of Science degree in nutrition dietetics. And that does come in very, very handy in helping discuss all the intricacies of being a diabetic. But my goal here is to keep things as simple as possible to make life easier for you. If you like what you see here today and you want to learn more, I highly suggest you hit that subscribe button, that like button, and then the notification bell, which is that little gray bell you see there, so that you don't miss a second of those upcoming life-saving episodes. You are definitely going to get some very conflicting advice on coffee, just like you would on the diet sodas. And if you missed that important eye-opening episode, I will create a link at the bottom there in the description box that'll get you directly to that video. Look for a little square box at the end, click it. If you haven't seen it, that'll take you directly to that video too. And there's a direct lesson in there for all diabetics in terms of how you're being manipulated. Now, whether you drink diet sodas or not, you need to know how you as a diabetic are being targeted and misled. So I suggest you do watch that video. Now, talk about manipulations and inconsistencies. 1 minute, coffee's bad. The next, coffee's good. If you remember not too long ago, coffee was really condemned by the media as being extremely bad for your health. Yet now, there's growing evidence that it may protect against certain cancers, liver disease, and even depression. Let's get into some statistics and facts on coffee. The average U.S. adult consumes about 2 8-ounce cups, about 474 milligrams of coffee a day, which contain around 200 milligrams of caffeine. So each cup contains around 120 to 130 milligrams of caffeine. For most young, healthy adults, caffeine does not appear to noticeably affect blood sugar levels, as long as it's consumed up to about 400 milligrams a day, which is considered safe. Caffeine is that drug that's found in coffee, and actually can be dangerous if consumed in excess. It is a stimulant, and it does speed up the central nervous system. So what happens? It raises blood pressure, it affects sleep, and definitely affects mood. This is why your doctor has to be involved, and they should generally clear you so that you're able to drink coffee or any other caffeine-based drink. Caffeine does occur naturally in about 60 different plants, including coffee beans and tea leaves. But artificial made caffeine is sometimes added to food, to energy drinks, to medications, and to prescription diet pills. Yes, folks, some of the caffeine you consume is actually artificially made. Even though caffeine is the most common ingredient discussed in coffee, there are other nutrients worth noting. The first one are called polyphenols, and they're molecules that act as antioxidants. What these antioxidants do? They prevent inflammation. They help fight free radicals and protect cells from damage, and we've discussed that in prior episodes. According to some research done at the University of Scranton, Americans get more of their antioxidants from coffee than any other dietary source. Now, if that study is accurate, it's interesting, but sad in certain ways, because it should be coming from other sources. Coffee also contains minerals: magnesium, chromium, manganese, and potassium. It is actually a source of 3 different B vitamins. So a single cup of coffee will have riboflavin, which is B2, pantothenic acid, which is B5, and niacin, which is B3. Does that mean that we as diabetics get to drink it? So let's briefly talk about the studies. I could do about 20 years worth of video on just looking at the thousands of studies and the follow-ups. But what we're going to do is we're going to summarize a few here, because I know your time is really valuable. In a study done by the University of Southern California, it showed people who drank coffee were 18% less likely to die in the next 10 to 16 years. Some studies show coffee is linked with lower risks of stroke, lower risks of liver and mouth cancer. It improves memory, and others, it shows it protects it against Parkinson's disease. A recent study found that coffee drinkers have lower fasting blood sugars. Other studies have found that coffee improves insulin function, may even lower resistance. Now, the study that changed everything was one that was done in 2014. Researchers at Harvard tracked over 100,000 people for about 20 years. This is really interesting. They found out that people who increased their coffee intake by over 1 cup a day had an 11% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. However, people who reduced their cup of coffee by 1 cup a day increased their risk of developing diabetes by 17%. So there was something either in that coffee, a compound that was protecting them from developing diabetes. They theorized that a blend of ingredients helped improve insulin sensitivity, which offset the adverse effects of the caffeine. Obviously, did that work for me? No. And those studies are all really good to read in here, but they're far from conclusive again. Do I drink coffee because of its health benefits? No. I, like you, should not be fooled by those studies. There's more to the equation on health and being a healthy diabetic than that cup of coffee. If you already have diabetes, the impact of caffeine on insulin action may be associated with either higher or lower blood sugar levels. And this is why it affects everyone differently. And I'll tell you what I do know about caffeine. It does have a short-term effect on blood sugar and insulin concentrations. Insulin sensitivity. What is that? It's the efficiency in which your body temporarily handles incoming glucose. Caffeine tends to reduce it temporarily post-consumption. And for most, looking in from the outside would say, that's a disastrous thing for a diabetic. And that would be correct. What caffeine does is it increases adrenaline, which increases lipolysis. What is that? It's a fancy word of saying the liberation of fatty acids from body fat. It's the kind of fat that causes the resistance that a lot of type 2 diabetics face. That increased sense of energy you get from coffee is caused actually by the increased availability of energy in the form of fats. So what happens is this: the body temporarily changes its ratios of sugars to fats to be used for energy. As it uses more fat for energy, there will be a slight buildup of sugars in the bloodstream as fat is utilized. The increase in fatty acids floating around causes a subsequent and necessary drop in what's known as insulin sensitivity. This kind of allows the fat to be used for energy instead of glucose. It all makes perfect sense if you consider the entire picture, but it sounds pretty scary out of context. And what is the bigger picture out of all this? The short-term rise in blood sugars creates a long-term benefit of reducing body fat if used correctly at the right times. The less body fat equates to higher overall sensitivity. over time, especially if that body fat that is used is the one that was stored inside the muscles, in between the organs, and the truncal fat, which is the fat around the abdomen. As long as your blood sugars are stable, and with your doctor's permission, we're now going to create our own very basic test models for coffee, or anything you want to know how it would affect you. And this is going to be Diabetes 101. Prior to your first test, you're also going to want a baseline. The day before we do the experiment, you're going to want to use water instead of coffee. See what numbers you come up with, and then use those as your reference. When is the best time to test? The morning, on an empty stomach. The meal prior to that night must be consistent. So you must have the same meal the evening before as you did when you run these tests. So if you had fish and vegetables at 6 p.m. one night, run the test the following morning, you're going to get different numbers if you had steak, eggs, and potatoes that you ate at 10 o'clock at night. Consume coffee, but with no other variable that will raise blood sugars, such as milk, cream, and sweeteners. So you want to drink your coffee black, if possible. If not, use the sweeteners that do not raise blood sugars. Those two would be NutraSweet, the blue pack, or the Sweet and Low, the pink pack. Take your readings prior to drinking your coffee, and then I like to do a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour test with no food. If the numbers are unreasonably high, try your experiment again, but with just half a cup. Sometimes what happens, there's a threshold of dose, which creates an undesirable result. For some of you, that half a cup will not raise blood sugars at all, but a full cup will. Interesting, but you'll find out. If you can't run your test first thing in the morning, eat your breakfast as normal. But if you're going to run your test after that, again, keep your breakfast constant. If you're having oatmeals one day, and then eggs, ham, bacon the next, you're going to get different readings again. So you have to keep those variables prior to drinking coffee constant and have it measured. So you don't want to have a bowl of oatmeal one day before and then half a cup the next day. If it's half a cup of oatmeal, it's half a cup of oatmeal. Drink your coffee at a set time, and then again, measure your blood sugars 1, 2, 3 hours post-mortem. Then you will know how much and if you can drink coffee. The other really important point I want to make is this. The more carbs you consume with coffee, the higher your blood sugars will be. This is really important to know. How does coffee affect me? It does not in the mornings, but it does marginally if I do drink it in the afternoon. If I get a small cup in the afternoon, it's very marginal. But if I overdo it, my blood sugars will rise. Lastly, how do I use coffee to keep me lean and fit? That will be a topic of an upcoming episode. I still need to cover some of the basics first, so I will tease you with that for now. Now, in the comment section below, I would love to see how coffee affects you in particular. I want you to run the experiment, post your complete results in the comment section below, your post numbers, and with any of the notes that you've made. That should be really, really interesting over time. If you found this episode helpful, please hit those alerts, that gray bell, the little one you see on top of the screen, and of course that subscribe button. And if you like what you've seen and heard today, that like button. Have a great and productive day, and we'll see you soon with another new episode, which are always released weekly. Bye for now.